And I am your host. We've got a really, really special episode for you today. For the first time ever, we are doing Beyond the Wrench live on a bunch of different social media platforms with our friends from the Walser Automotive Group. Before we get started with introductions, I do want to take a second to tell you why we wanted to do this. This is a little different than a typical webinar that we do or a typical podcast, but really, Walser has been a great partner to us at WrenchWay over the years, and we've been able to see their operation up close and personal. And the more I learn about how they operate and who they are as people, the more impressed I am. So being able to do this with their team is incredibly special to me. And I am so looking forward to seeing what they have to say. I know we're all going to learn a lot, and it should be a really, really great day. Now, on to the intros. I have four of the great team members at Walser Automotive joining me today. Welcome to the show, all. All right, so let's start off with introductions. Sherry, I'm going to have you lead off. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do at Walser.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Love being on. My name's Sherry, and I'm the head of HR, all things people at the Walser Automotive Group. We're a large dealership group, 25 dealership roofs, and then affiliate businesses as well, about 2,000 employees. I am passionate about all things that go into that HR job, but I also oversee technology. I don't know how I got that one, but I do. I have that as well, which is a tool for employees, and it really it's been a great opportunity to sort of expand the things that I do here at Walser. So anything that touches a person, from payroll to benefits to rewards to programs to staffing, all the things that you could imagine go into it. But I think the beauty of what we do and the way that my team supports the organization is through very progressive programs that answer employees' needs. So if we're not serving our employees and coming up with things to close the gap on something, I'd say it's not your traditional HR. We'll do a lot of different things to be business literate and fluent on behalf of our employees. And then, ultimately, we'll solve problems that they have that seem maybe unconventional for an HR team to do. I've been here about 7+ years and love it every day.
And Sherry and I had the chance to be on a panel together probably a year or so ago down in
Yep.
Florida. And
Yep.
similar to everything I've talked about with Walser, sitting down with her, being on a panel on a stage, and just seeing her work her magic. It was phenomenal. So very excited to be joined by Sherry.
You know,
Lindsey, can you? Oh, sorry, Sherry.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say one thing, because I think that panel, Jay and I met, and we definitely had good chemistry as it pertains to people. And I think finding partners in the tech space who want to advocate and get it is really important to me. I like to be around like company, and I think that's important. And I think from an HR perspective, over the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of my peers in this job um, drop off and say, hey, I didn't sign up for this. COVID had its impact on the profession. And my philosophy around all of this is you sign up for what people need. And so you don't not sign up for something, or I get all that, but we sign up for what the world gives us. And it has been a very dynamic 5 years. And so, meeting you and hearing that you were just passionate about things that technicians care about, as well as all people, honestly, was a breath of fresh air. So my team and I are excited to be here.
Oh, thank you so much, Sherry. And we're going to get to the rest of the team too. Lindsey, you and I have worked together for a few years now, and always enjoy our conversations. Fellow Packer fan, we're still tail between our legs with that. But Lindsey, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having us. This has been a few months in the making, so we're excited to finally get this over the finish line and start the new year. My name is Lindsey Trett. I oversee talent acquisition for the group. I've been with the company for 16 years. I started my career here. My first day at Walser was my first day at college and my first day in Minnesota, basically. I'm a South Dakota native and found my way to the Twin Cities and was lucky enough to be referred to the Walser Automotive Group from one of my dad's basketball players' moms, who still actually consults with Walser to this day on their building design and aesthetics. So 16 years later, I've been groomed and I've grown up here and have done a lot of different roles, but my favorite foundational role was working with the service departments and then going on to support process and implementation in the shops with the technicians, with the technology that supports the advisors, the technicians, the shop flow, which intended our direction forward to Techion, which is our new DMS. So I was excited to be a part of that, but I learned a lot about technicians and then found my way to recruitment, which was a connection from the technician programmatic efforts I was doing on the other side of my role. And so 2.5 years ago, Sherry and our owner, Andrew, well, now almost 3 years, asked me to take on recruiting. And it's been one of the biggest blessings to be able to look at the other lens, going from operational to strategic and knowing what's happening on the ground and then taking it to a higher level. That's extremely important. You'll hear more about that from Rick and Jon, who are still boots on the ground. But staffing the organization is now my #1 priority, and how we do that progressively with a modern approach, but an intentional approach backed by our value proposition, which is family, career, and diversity. So you'll hear a little bit about that today. So happy to be here.
Such an honor to have you. As always, a lot of fun to talk to, but not only fun, just a lot of knowledge over the years that you've gained in the dealership world, and a lot for all of us to learn from today. Next, I'm going to go to Mr. Jon Olstad. How in the world are you doing? Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having us, Jay. This is a great opportunity. So I started in the industry in 2000. So worked my way up to master certified, this, that, and the other through the General Motors world. About a year ago or a couple of years ago, they asked me to kind of spearhead a new model, so to speak, of the team lead role, just kind of think about it differently. And with the primary goal of increasing shop production and tech hours, right? So everybody making more money. It worked pretty well. And by the end of that, they approached me about taking on this role, which is now a fixed ops manager that I primarily oversee technician production. One of the things, and Sherry will attest to this, when I kind of interviewed or was talked to about the role, is that your typical fixed ops manager usually does it from this setting, an office, and I said no thank you. So it was a matter of I was going to be in the stores, boots on the ground, working with technicians. I still help assist fix cars at all our manufacturers that I go and visit when I'm there. But ideally, it is the role is to find a way to make the technicians more productive in whatever facet that may come in. So
I think that is such a neat position, and I think speaks to volumes to the adaptability of Walser to identify gaps and be able to fill those gaps with positions that might not be that traditional thing, right? And I think having the foresight to be able to see that and say, hey, you know what, we could improve this, I think is a testament to the entire organization. Rick, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yep, I'm Rick Dotte, journeyman technician at Walser Polar Chevrolet. Been in the industry since 2012. Been at Polar here since 2014. Worked my way from internal technician, lube tech, up to journeyman, heavy duty truck specialties, stuff like that. Also a member of the technician advisory team that Walser has. It's kind of a bridge between the gap of senior leadership and the technician level. Usually it's about a quarterly meeting, and we just kind of go over, what's going on in the dealerships with senior management. That kind of covers it.
Yeah, and it's a big role to be able to do what you're doing. So you mentioned the technician advisory committee. We'll talk more about that as we go through the podcast. And that's one of the coolest things I think I had ever heard, when I believe Lindsey had first told me about it, and maybe one of our first podcasts that we had done. And it's again, another innovative way to communicate. We hear it in all of our surveying. We hear it from technicians every day. One of the biggest struggles that technicians have is communication from leadership. And Walser has done a phenomenal job at being able to really streamline that, make it more effective, right? So, all right, I'm going to break down the episode, and the way that we're doing this, we're recording it live, but then it will go out into a 3-part series on the Beyond the Wrench podcast. Again, you can download that through any channel that you get your podcast from. The 3 different episodes, or how we're breaking this down, are going to be first starting off with vision and people strategy. So really kind of understanding how ideas come about, and really what makes them effective and what makes them good ideas. At times, I think we all come up with ideas that we feel like are good at the time and then sleep on it and maybe they aren't as good. So really kind of talking through that people strategy as a whole. The second piece is really the communicating, how you take that vision and make sure that it's properly communicated to the team, so that we can then do the number 3 thing we're going to talk about. And that is the execution and the feedback loop that goes along with being able to understand, is something effective when we do execute on it. So we're going to start with you, Sherry, and really start with the why, right? I think it's always nice to start with the why and understand why this is important in the first place. So this might be kind of a rhetorical question, but it's almost intentionally rhetorical. Why is people strategy so important, Sherry?
Yeah, I mean, again, not just because I'm the head of HR, because you would assume that that's falls in my camp. I want to back up a little bit, because I'm going to be humble for a minute and suggest as well that from a people perspective, when we began that TAT meeting, one of the things I noticed in dealership world, and it is at the epicenter of our people strategy, is that you can't advocate for people you don't know and you don't understand. And for all of us who live in a dealership world, or quite frankly, any company at all, I would say our team and general managers, they knew every salesperson, their blood type, their family. I'm telling you, it was intense. They knew it all. And I remember sitting back probably at around month 7 for me and saying, I don't know these texts as well. I do not. And so it was a moment that I said, okay, I can't put a strategy for the organization together and tag it with people if I don't know all people. And so that's how TAT was born. And it was a kind of, it's personally uncomfortable for senior leaders when we pulled everybody together and said, you know what? We don't know you as much as we need to. And so I think that from a leadership perspective, I ask myself at every juncture, how close am I to the people? Do I feel it? Am I distant? Am I there? And so, it's a good litmus test, I think, for anybody who's listening and thinking about their populations. You got to know your people, right? You can't assume anything and things change. So why a people strategy is important. People usually ask me for a tech strategy or a diversity strategy or a recruitment strategy. And you can't have any of those things if you don't have a people one. And so you have to believe inherently in the value that people bring and their differences, and there are differences between our populations, between people, between some of our affiliate businesses. People are different. And I think when you think about why have a people strategy, Jay, to me, it's like asking my owners, why have an inventory strategy? Right? You can't do business without it. And so we can't do business without the people side of things. But when you try to shoot for a goal that is a means to an end, you fail, right? Because it's not sustainable, it's disingenuous, right? So if I was just going to come up with a tech strategy, but didn't take the time to understand how all of the programs tie back to them as individuals and understand what we were hoping to do with people, it would fail. So Andrew and I said, no one and done. Andrew Walser, who is the CEO and who I've been working with closely for 7 years, he wanted something that could build on itself, and that we designed to be not programmatic, but flexible, and so Jay, honestly, we're not perfect. There's a lot of things that we could do a lot better. There's a lot of times that we move quickly and we're always innovating, but we are always trying to make progress. And I think in the end, the ability for you to have a people strategy allows you to refresh your goals and investments every year around what's important and evaluate what's under the hood all the time and see, is it working? but you can't do that without knowing your people. I mean, literally knowing who they are and what they want. So seems kind of maybe cheesy or, a little bit sappy. But if you want to design something that works for people, you have to ask them. And a lot of people think they know, but they don't really know. Right. So that's why it's critical. We employ 2,000 people. At times our turnover is higher than we'd like, but our goal with the technicians is usually met in the spirit of retention. And I think a lot of it has to do with, our connection to the people. And I am nothing but a phone call away, any of my staff, or Andrew for that matter, when our employees need us. So I think there's something to be said for proximity as well. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that I've taken away from working so closely with all of you is that it's not just a saying on a wall. It's not just that, hey, we do this, but in reality, if you were to ask somebody on the team, it doesn't happen. You mentioned not being perfect, but I think one of the really big things that I see out of your group is kind of that constant trying to, shooting for perfection, right? And Lindsey, you probably have that Vince Lombardi quote right off the top of your head, but it is really aiming for perfection all the time, knowing that maybe you're not going to get there, but you're always trying to improve. You're always trying to get better. And whether I'm talking to Sherry, Lindsey, anybody on the team, I'll get a book recommendation from time to time. I'll get, some type of video to watch, something that is even helping me as a partner of Walser. And I think that's such a cool piece, but that really getting to know somebody is really easy to say. And oftentimes it's really hard to do, especially when you have the amount of rooftops that you do. Terry, any advice on how to maintain those relationships when you are at that scale?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And both Rick and Jon will recall the day that I had to venture into the chili shop for me of Chevy at a moment when chemistry might have been off, right? We've had these, and in every work group it is. And one of the things that I do is I never apologize for my empathy and my softer side, right? In the end, it's not just about having answers. It's about having empathy and concern, right, for what's happening with individuals, and you'll learn more. So we do something in our organization, which I've done with these guys. Lindsey and I've done it about 100 times, but I've done it with Rick and Jon probably 2 or 3 different times. It's called a values exercise. And it's kind of it's a call to action in a work group or a new person or a new work group or for new hires. And we look at a list of values that actually kind of occur in psychology. And there's 85 of them. And we give individuals the opportunity to look through the list and define their top 5. So you go from 20 to 10 to 5. And we ask a lot of questions and we share with each other, because what we're trying to accelerate is what's important to you. Right? Most people don't share that type of depth, or it takes many, many years, right? And I'm trying to collapse time around some of that conversation. And so we ask, why is the value on your list? Why is it important? How will I see it at work? And so when I know that mastery is important to Rick, I'm going to understand why he wants to run down something until he's got it. And he's not going to lose that knowledge, because knowledge and mastery are important to him. So as an example, so I think we do this exercise, and it's funny. What I learned from the Chevy team was that there were men who worked side by side, bay by bay, for years and did not know each other, And so if you understand your people, you will know how not to cross them, hurt them potentially, and you'll also know how to motivate them. And so it's really an exercise in exposure and communication, humanizing people. And we did that exercise and we got to the root of some of the issues, and we can fall back on that. And so that is one of the things that when a new leader comes in, we'll do. When a work group is misfiring, when new team members come onto a group, and we do it in new hire orientation. And I've actually done that class at Women in Automotive, NADA, various classes, because people ask how you build a value proposition for employees. We've done it Lindsay, how many? 500 times more. And every time, and I could say for these two gentlemen as well, family is number 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in the top 5. And so when you look at our benefits, there's going to be a family component to it, right? Whether it's maternity, paternity, adoption, fertility assistance, whether it's a 4-day work week, whether it's bring your child to work day, those are there because people like Rick and Jon tell us that family matters, and so that's why we do it. And that's how you maintain it. So, it seems like, people say, well, that seems like a lot of work. Yeah. There's no silver bullet. You want to be good for people, you have to be with them. So.
Amen. And Jon, I'll go to you, and then Rick, I'll go to you after. But I do want to talk about how something like that goes, right? Because I think a lot of times in a shop, when you have executive leadership come in, it can be, I don't want to say intimidating, but maybe you're a little skeptical as to why they're coming in, right? Like why all of a sudden do they care about us, or why all of a sudden are they shining a light on us? Going back to that example that Sherry had used, do you recall kind of how you felt about it initially, and maybe did it make you uneasy at all, or was it just kind of cool?
Well, this was shortly after the dealership we were at, or that Rick and I came from the same dealership originally. And then Walser acquired us in like 2017-ish, somewhere around there, end of 2017. And it was probably within a year that happened. The time before that felt like a lot of smoke and mirrors. You'd get told something, nothing happens. I think I might have mentioned it in the podcast that you and I did, where the quote that I always kind of came to mind was, your words are empty actions or empty containers that you fill with your actions. And there was a lot of empty containers floating around that store. So just felt like everything just got broomed under the carpet. Nobody really cared. And then this happened, and I think I'd maybe met Sherry once or twice by then. Um, Never met Pete, who also came in. And I was just kind of like, well, here we go. We're going to blow some more smoke, get the smoke machines ready. And when they started though, it was like, okay, it was really what cracked it open for me. Like, these people are serious. They're going to actually fill these containers rather than just blowing smoke at us. And it makes you want to buy in to what they want to do. And I think almost everybody in a shop, because the reality of it is in the shop, and Rick can attest to this too, is for the most part, the industry standard is you're kind of a man on your own. You're an island of yourself, right? And it shouldn't be that way. You have people that are working right next to you for 15, 20 years that, yeah, the sense of being a team, right? Some of them, yes, you get it's sometimes it feels a little bit like middle school. You get a little clicky. Whereas when you come together as a shop and you lock arms as a shop, those shop goals become attainable. And it starts, like Sherry said, with people and understanding them. And she thought it was a little sappy or whatever. I thought that too. But as a lead, one of the things that helped, I think, our shop really go to the next level was when I started doing my own one-on-ones with everybody and asking them those questions. What makes you tick? Why do you come here every day? Getting to know them. And at first I was kind of like hesitant, like, am I just going to kind of get the middle finger and like go away kind of thing? I don't want to talk to you about that stuff. Who do you think you are? And most of them I knew for 8+ years. I was shocked how open everybody became. And like the sense of like them wanting to do this on a regular cadence. So we did. But it also allowed me to push them, because I knew then what they wanted. They didn't get an excuse anymore when, we're trying to get to a shop goal or their own goal. And I get to remind them, why they come here every day. So, from my perspective, it was a big thing that really filled me up to a point where it's like, okay, I can hook onto that train and let's go. Let's just go.
I want to say one thing to you, Jon, and Rick knows this too. That for me, and I think one of the reasons that leaders don't often do things like that, Jay, I was petrified. I was walking into that shop and I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna be bad. I think leaders run from things, especially senior ones, whatever that is, right? I have responsibility for a lot of things, but leaders who won't face that, that's a limiting quality. And I was scared. I mean, you walk into that blue wall, they're staring at you like, I mean, it was intense. And I think the second thing, you've got to overcome that fear and recognize that, we're all human, right? But the other thing is that you have to be willing to be vulnerable as a leader. And like, that means apologize. That means, fill your container, as Jon says, with truth and action. But I think, for me, I work with a guy that he referenced named Pete, who is similar to me in that way. I mean, he's going to be vulnerable. And a lot of leaders, somewhere along the way, they learn that you have to walk and talk in a certain way and, always be in control and all that. I wholeheartely disagree. I mean, you got to be real and you got to be vulnerable. And to walk into that group of guys that I had a lot of respect for, but also a lot of fear of, because it was an intense group. And, it was a game changer for the company, honestly, because I can't tell you the number of people who said, where are you going? To do what? With them? Oh, no, no, no. Like, I was strongly discouraged from, you're going to hold them over at night and how long? We were there 5 hours, Rick, right? I mean, it was
Yeah, it was about 5 hours. Pretty good
Well,
meeting.
Rick, go with that. Like, what did you have a similar thought process or experience to what Jon was talking about in, that initial kind of weariness or skepticism of why they're doing it, and then maybe kind of that same experience of, okay, they're being real here.
Yeah, I think I wasn't in it quite as long as Jon was with the crew that we had, but I had certainly experienced some of the, negative shop aspects that had been going around. And so for me, it was, maybe there is some hope here that it is actually going to be addressed. Those jars are going to be filled instead of just, put on the shelf to collect dust. And I think going through it, like going through that 5 hour meeting where we deep dove into some of the systemic political shop, problems. I kept, kind of having in the back of my mind, like, okay, well, we're not just kind of shying this away to a next meeting, or, okay, we'll deal with this next quarter. It was like, all right, we want to know what's it going to take. And I think that, that level of commitment that we saw that day, and then we've seen time and time after, where, I guess I can't imagine most companies are sending, the kind of the top two senior leaders into the parts room of a shop, to deep dive into it. And it's like, okay, if they're willing to put in the effort, then I think we as technicians also have to give that same effort. If if we care enough to sit through that meeting and then, come to work every day and complain about what's wrong, we also should care enough to, put effort into, okay, let's fix it. Like, that's what we do. We're mechanics. We fix things, whether it's people, whether it's policy, whether it's cars, I
Yeah,
think it's important to have that commitment to it.
Well, and I think to really talk about the elephants in the room, right? I think Sherry alluded to this before, where it's really easy to go surface level. Rick, I think you were kind of saying the same thing too, where it's easy to just go into that meeting and check the box. And Sherry, I had a similar experience to you early in my leadership career, and I think it's an underrated aspect of leadership within service departments, fixed ops in general, where you can have that level of intimidation because maybe you didn't come from the same background as the people that you're talking to. So I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or I don't know what it is, but it does make that conversation really intimidating. And I think for most techs that are out there, they might not truly understand that. They might think, hey, here comes this bigwig that's trying to tell us what to do. When in reality, so many leaders are trying to help you. And if you can let your guard down a little bit, I think it does help everybody. Sherry, I'm curious how you went into that conversation and really kind of, I don't want to say talked yourself into it, but like how did you get in the right mental mindset to go attack that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm wired that way a little bit in the spirit of I have great respect for people who do things that I don't know or can't do at this point. And so I think the one challenge that I think a lot of leaders, and we talk about this with our GMs, because most of our general managers and grow up in the front end, right? They grow up on the sales side. And so it's awkward when you're sitting in a position of from a leadership perspective and you actually don't know the terminology, you don't know how the work is dispatched, you don't understand the work at all, or what a day in the life of a tech looks like. And so, it's one thing to be in awe of something that you can't do. There's another thing to ignore it. And that's, I think, you can get so far down the path in automotive without fixed understanding. And, I credit a lot of my knowledge to both Rick and Jon, because I would ask a lot of like, help me with the numbers, help me with the reporting, help me figure this out, help me. And it's complicated, it's complicated. And I think that question around financial literacy for leaders in the fixed space was and continues to be a journey for everybody who's willing to go down that path from an education perspective. And if you're a dealer, you know that service retention is what drives the financial performance of your company. And so if I buy a new car and don't service it with you, or don't get great service, or don't have an experience that says I'll go back to you for service, the company's not going to do as well. So how you could know and have that reliance, but not really understand and be educated on the way hours and jobs feel to a technician, I think is, I don't know. I think it lacks a little bit of self-awareness if you're a leader who doesn't really understand at the depths of what your company's doing, what for us 500 people do. It's not a small group. And so that's what it was for me. And it wasn't talking myself into it. It was being willing to stand up and say, I've been here 7 months. I'm trying to learn. You're right. We don't know what we should know to help you. And so you had to be real with yourself, and just say, I gotta figure this out. And I don't always think a lot of leaders are willing to do that. And then the last thing I'd say on it is what also has to happen. And I think both Rick and Jon and I have had this conversation about their prior general managers. When you do that, you level the playing field from an esteem perspective. And I want techs who feel as compelled and important to walk on the show floor and grab their GM when they need support as well. And so it isn't a relegation to the bay. It's you are a very important contributor to the performance of the company. And there should be no resistance on a tech's part to walk on that show floor and grab a GM if they need it. You know what I mean? And like I find it, so it has to work both ways too. You have to build that relationship so the confidence allows for both of those things to happen. And, and now I start every store visit in the back. I go to the shop before I go, I'll work it because it's actually become almost a bit more comfortable for me than the show floor at times. So.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little something to that too. I mean, I think the biggest thing is what Walser did is at that time when TAT started, when Sherry came into Chev, is they went against well, this is the way we've always done it, right? The way we've always done it is in the fixed ops world, the technicians especially the technicians, we've always just kind of been left alone because we figure it out. We don't need as much of the attention, so to speak, from the management to turn the numbers because we just do it. That's what we came there to do. That's what we went to school to do 99% of the time. We're just people that get it done as technicians. So they never really had to step foot in the back, kind of like Sherry mentioned, the previous GMs. I knew him. He's a super nice guy. But the reality of it is some of them, I think I could count on one hand and not use all fingers how many times he walked through the shop in a year. It's just, they were non-existent, and there just wasn't any sense of accountability on what was brought up in service. And to kind of to piggyback on what Rick and Sherry said, they're willing to have those crucial conversations, right? I think the thing that I've learned the most in the last 3 years of being a lead and then this role is the buildup you give yourself in your head of how bad it's going to go never happens. 99.9% of the time, it doesn't happen. You think you're going to end up in a shouting match in the middle of the shop, throwing tools, whatever it is. I don't know. But it's just like, oh, why didn't I do that earlier? Because now the delaying that and getting real with your people is what ultimately prolongs the results you're looking for. Until you can do that, I think the results just become they're too far out there. One of the guys, and I'm pretty sure I heard this from him, that I know Sherry and Pete, and I've had the pleasure of listening to him talk a couple times. His name's Eric Bowles, and one of the things he said in one of his little speeches was, and it's short, so it's easy to remember, and it stuck with me, like really, really, really stuck with me. Leaders say, "I'm sorry." That's it. And it's simple, but it's very profound. If you can't admit when you're wrong, you can't lead into these crucial conversations, because then they'll never want to have them with you. If you're always right, nobody's going to come to you. So, yeah,
Eric's a great guy, Jay. He's an executive coach. He's been coaching me for almost 11 years. And he's real big time. And both Rick and Jon and Lindsey have spent time with him. We have a program called Emerging Leaders, which all three of these individuals have been in Emerging Leaders, and an accelerated kind of career development. And he speaks to the Emerging Leader crew. And for me, I have a monthly conversation, because you have to keep your head right to take on the ups and downs of business like that. And so he's a coach that we use. And so we use him for some of the coaching that we have for some of our development programs. And I think what Jon's talking about in terms of the I'm sorry piece, I think it's no secret that we'd start this call off with a warm tone. The reason that we spend time thinking about how people feel is because 99% of the time, I put myself in Rick's shoes and I think, how would I feel on flat rate? Like at the mercy of this every single day. And so for me, I know what that does, but I've not been in that. And so I want as much relief associated with any minute I'm going to have conversation, better help them some way along the way, and vice versa. They do the same for me. But I think, not to shift on it, but I think it also came down to when you're demanding of a result from an organization, you also have to put yourself in the shoes of those that are trying to deliver it and say, how easy, how hard, how we made it. And I've got domestic techs on the phone that have a very different run than an import tech, which, we've got some work to do on the way we design things for domestic techs. So I think you have to recognize that the system that they live in too, it's hard. I mean, it's hard. And I think, I want to say that I do everything I can to keep the morale up on things I can control. I can't always control what job comes in that they're going to make time or not make time on, and so I always worry about resilience in a work group like that, which is why I spend so much time with them.
Yeah, as we're talking, and Lindsey, I'll get to you in just a second. I feel bad that I'm leaving you on an island right now, but we'll have a lot of stuff from you coming up here shortly. Craig James on Facebook says, I was 14 years automotive, majority Honda, Acura, and 3 years independent hourly. Had to make a change and get out for all of the political reasons and shop drama you've spoken about, along with poor leadership from service managers and favoritism in dispatching work. I was highly certified by Honda, ASEs, inspection stickers, the whole nine. Bottom line is that he would like to see a better pay system. And I do think, this might not be Walser specific, but one of the things that I have seen a little bit of an adaptation in our industry with is being able to meet that technician where they want to be met, right? Instead of trying to jam one system down their throat. And Sherry, I think you were kind of alluding to that there too. where it is having a conversation and understanding where somebody's at and what is really, really important to them. And so, Craig, appreciate the comment. I think we hear that a lot, whether through social media or direct conversations with technicians, that desire and that need to maybe just feel heard and be able to maybe match the system a little bit to what those technicians are looking for. Sherry?
Well, that's why we did the job. I mean, and whether you're Jon Olstad or a team lead in a store, or you're, an unofficial trainer on the shop floor, right? One of the reasons that we formalized that is I had a conversation with someone in Rick and John's shop, and he said something to me that, Craig, if I'm hearing you, whoever, whichever group you're in or whatever your job you were in, one of the things this tech said to me is, nothing's going to ever change for me. I have no choice. And I was heartbroken by that statement. And I remember it, and I said, what do you mean? He said, there's nothing else. I have no choice. And I said, I disagreed with him. And I said, maybe we haven't talked about another choice. And so when I looked around and I thought, one of the most valuable, beneficial things that great techs can do is lead other techs, help them through the process of shared knowledge and education. And honestly, I think lift them up from the days of a poor times or a bad job, or the propensity for dispatch to feel off. I get all that. I get that. But in the end, like, who is educating you, and how isolated does that feel for the person who, another tech like this particular one, or Craig, that says, I can't, I have there's nothing else for me. And the body and the mind maybe don't wear out at the same pace, And so I'm always thinking about, what to do to give a tech a great career that doesn't end up in some, physically debilitated state, but is helping develop the next generation, because I think it's really important. And how much more believable is the insight when you're talking to young, productive educators like Rick and Jon, and so that's why we developed the program. It was to look at people and say, you just got to wrench for your entire life, which, if you want to do that, that's awesome as well. It's not about that. It's about feeling like there's no other choice. There has to be another choice. And that's, Lindsey and I started working together based on all of the opportunities out there, by showing them what happens to the Ricks and the Johns of the world.
Lindsey, I'm sure you hear similar stories every day when you're talking to technicians outside of the Walser network, or maybe even students. I mean, can you maybe dive into what Sherry's saying, even at a little deeper level? Because some of those conversations that you and I have had about what technicians hear out there is concerning. It's concerning for our industry, right? Because if they feel like Sherry was saying, where they don't feel like they have a home here, that's troublesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I've been bringing Rick and Jon and people with me, because they help me be more credible and the company more credible, because I have true examples that are in our shop or have lived in the shop, showing the students or our talent coming in that we do things differently. And we are striving for change every day. But one thing I wrote down on here too is we always find a united purpose of where we're headed. And so when I have a Rick and a Jon, and we have a campus captain program that you may or may not dive into later with us, but we chose specific technician leaders and or advanced technician skill sets in any capacity regionally by SOAR, to assign them to either a community partner or an education partner to go with me and my team on campus to speak with faculty, to speak with students. We do this probably 5 to 10 times a month on average, because we cover a wide radius of stores and cities that our stores support. And we need them. They need me and I need them. So if I am not united in where we're headed, my message and all the material and all the content we put out there will not stand if when that technician comes in for their interview and it's not actually the stage that I set, then what was the point? So Sherry and I, a few years back, developed our program called Tech Life. And part of that is career pathing. It is education. It is shop mentorship. It is the belief that you can be more than what you are today, but you have to start somewhere. And so Rick and I actually just responded to an instructor at a school. And he goes, what is the most important thing or list of things that you feel you would tell students entering this industry? And at the end of the day, it's setting real expectations. We need your dependability. We need your attendance. We need your willingness to learn. We need great attitude. But we also want you to know that this is a journey, that if you have someone or some people like us to support you, the journey is a lot better. The journey is tough. We have tough days. We have great days. But Jon said this a little bit earlier this week when we were together. We could have a few tough days, but we could end it and make the week really great versus a bad week. And so we are all united in the way we think and the way we talk. But these two on this call specifically, and Sherry's my boss, we are united in where we want to go. But we do show vulnerability with each other too. There are times where Jon's like, Lindsey, I don't know about this, or he'll tell Sherry, I don't know. And Rick goes, I had some feedback from a student or an instructor. Can we check into this? Like, we are always communicating constantly from the ground to the top. Like, we're all together in that. And that makes my job a lot easier. And know, am I doing something today that actually has an impact, or is this just, checking a box? Like, we will never do anything to just check a box. I'll tell you that right now. No way.
Jay, that
Oh,
Craig
sorry,
asked,
Sherry, go ahead.
just because Craig did ask about pay and like a different system and stuff. So Lindsey and I have talked a little bit about this. And I think that as we think about the team lead roles and the growth, I know for Rick and Jon, whether they were salaried or on flat rate or whatever, it wouldn't matter, because mastery and performance is core to their DNA. And so, it's interesting because what I think both of them try and do with younger technicians is bring that out in them, which means you have to be in it for the right reason. You have to really love this, because people always say, do you have to be happy to be successful or successful to be happy? I think you have to be happy to be successful first. And so I think both of you would say you love what you do. But when you rise into these roles, our structure is more salaried with incentives that are on total shop hours, right? And so that we're helping both proficiency and general hours, right? And that's an important equation for all, right? And so the more the hours are done in the shop works for Jon, because that's volume, right? We get that. But also being mindful of how to do that is important, because you're building proficiency, which is great for Rick, right? So you look at a combination of the different ways that you can do it. And so for Craig, who's listening, or whoever is thinking about that, I think when you don't see the prospect of another step or the ability or maybe even desire to become a service manager, I can understand. It can feel limiting. The reason that we spend a lot of time talking about communication, Jon said crucial conversations, we engage Eric Bowles, is because what techs will most of the time tell me, I don't want, I can do what I do, but I don't want the customer communication. I don't want that drama with the people. I don't. Well, they're actually really good at it. They are, because they're more practical in some cases, right? Rick has said to me many times, cars don't talk back, right? They don't talk back to me. And so there's a lot of truth to that. But what I find is their aptitude and intellectual, curiosity makes them great students of anything. And that includes communication and problem resolution, which is really all it's about. And so we use that to show that there are investments that get made in your ability, so that moving off of a flat rate system into a job where your leadership impact is paid for as well, it's very important to me to be able to do for them.
Rick, it looks like you want to add something there.
Yeah, I think I kind of read through Craig's comment there, and I agree. Like, a lot of the times whether you're an experienced technician coming into the field for the first time, you're pushed to perform. Like, you want to hit hours every day, every week. That's the that's how you define yourself. And I think, that's, obviously how we get paid. So, it can feel like that's where you find your value. And it is wrong. Like the flat rate system is kind of set to do that. You constantly just want to be in competition with everyone else and with yourself. You want to improve year over year, but hours are not that definitive of value in a person. There are people in our store that, I'd rather have 1,800, 2,000 hours out of this person than 2,500 hours out of somebody else. I think people can get lost in defining themselves by that sole metric that, it does need reform. The whole flat rate, could be reworked. There's always modifications to be done. And I think it's just important that if you're coming into the industry, make sure that you're in an environment or a shop specifically that, can you progress? Can you grow yourself and become more marketable and more valuable aside from the hours? If not, keep looking, because there are better shops out there. There are better companies out there. Don't let a shop that's not going to put the effort into you limit yourself. It's kind of the gist of what I'm seeing there.
It's so great to hear that. And I think from your shoes, it's so powerful to hear that. The one thing I would say is that what Lindsey mentioned earlier, bringing both Rick and Jon along to some of these, to honestly adapt your positions. What is the power for a technician to see that it's not a company just saying that, hey, we've got career advancement opportunities for you, but you are visible proof that there are career advancement opportunities. How powerful is it to actually see it?
It's intangible. You can't, like you said, you can't see it, you can't touch it, and no one can take it away from you. I think is the biggest thing. It's something that it's hard to describe. Maybe Jon or Sherry could tee in, and they might be able to grasp it a little better.
Yeah, production it's a funny thing, right? It's something that's needed. It's what drives the industry. You've heard talks over the years of, oh, if we just pay people hourly, and I've been asked that question, and I said, if you go that way, yes, you might have some happier people, but your production as a store will plummet. You will find a new basement because that's where it will go. And I know exactly how Craig feels, and I know Rick does too, because Rick and I grew up in the industry for many years at the same shop, and it's to the point where, to help maybe relate with Craig is back in 2004 when GM announced the 2004 Z06 Corvette, you had to have a Corvette certified technician. Well, guess what? We didn't. So I had to go upstairs, stay late till whatever time it was, and take all these online tests so that we could get it delivered, right? And I was the only one that did that stuff at that time, right? So the thing that I had to learn to kind of see it differently is the difference between fair and equal. For me, fair is I have the same opportunity to get a car in my bay. Equal is going to be I'm more highly trained than pretty much everybody else in the shop. Therefore, I'm likely going to get more difficult work, period. And I accepted that. It took a while. And there is a period where it's like, did I really do this to myself? Because that's ultimately what it is. You chose to better yourself, to make yourself more valuable, to feed your why. For me, my why is I wanted to know as much as I could about the cars, so I didn't have to ask anybody. Because if anybody listening to this has ever had to call a technical assistance center for their manufacturer, they know exactly what I'm talking about, right? The fewer times you have to dial that number, the better. The other thing is I knew it would provide better for my family. The more I knew, the more I could go the more I would open myself up to that fair equation of now I have another category of car that I can put in my bay and make money with. If I limit myself to just being the base journeyman, and some stores do, some stores don't, it's kind of dependent on the location probably and the size of the dealership. But when the dealerships are bigger, you have diesel specialists, you have transmission specialists, you have EV specialists. I was all of those and journeyman. The transmission was the only one that I kind of more assisted with, but I did them all. So I would challenge Craig to take another look at it and make sure it's fair, but it might not be equal based on his training. And the thing is we need the Craigs. We want the Craigs. And that is, like to Sherry's point, with some of the pay structures that we've been rolling out this last year for our team leads. So the ones that do dispatch and run the shops, the way I look at it as a team lead is they run the shop. I don't want to see the service manager in the back. I want them in the front, fine tuning our advisors so that we get better write-ups, we get better everything when it comes to fixing the car, right? So my team leads, I want them to be that shop manager, and their pay structure is based off of two things essentially, and it's total shop hours and total shop proficiency. So in that regards, you take away I'm going to feed a guy like Rick that I know if I give him the right work, he'll bang 70 to 80 hours every week. But this guy over here, he's going to struggle and maybe be at 80% proficient, right? I can't make a paycheck that way then as a lead. So it's incentivizing you to get the hours and not hold your heavy hitters back, but to bring up the people that need that help to a level that raises the whole shop. So,
and that job also has to be, Jay, given to someone who they run not because they're paid to, they run because they want to, right? Because, and they're individuals that think about leadership and performance and their own skill, not to covet it, but to give it away. And that's the thing that has been, I'm at the point in my own career too, when I think about HR, I can cut through an investigation, an analysis, because now again, everyone is different. I want my team to have that fluency. And so I give it away so that they can be better, more exposed, more practiced. I want them to experience the good, the bad, the ugly, and they get better at it that way. And sometimes I find that a lot of technicians, I understand why you covet the information. You're trying to make time. You're trying to be better. And I get that. But when you have individuals that are willing to give that away and are willing to, they run no matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter. That's a really difficult thing to inspire in young technicians or individuals that are doing it. And I will tell you, I also have a feeling about money and what this looks like. I think that what we all always hope is that you are working because you want to, not because you have to. And so, and again, none of us are, wow, I got there and that's how I feel every day. It isn't about that. But I watched Rick on his shop floor talking to John too, thinking about it, but the day with Rick was unique because he was talking about how you leverage your 401k. And I will never forget, I thought I was it was like a little financial advising thing going on, but the ability for him to speak about wealth generation to a group of individuals who would have been individuals that could have said to me, I'm getting raw deals. This batch is unfair, right? I mean, we went through this and I was watching this and I'm looking at the fact that he is creating freedom because he's explaining how you make your own money grow. And that is a really important thing. So when we talk about family, everybody always thinks we're talking about it for the purposes of balance. We're also talking about it for the purposes of providing for your family. And I want to make that super clear. This is a not-for-profit business. We are here for that. But I love, Rick's, young son will have whatever college degree paid for if that's the way he goes or not, because Rick is thinking about that now. Jon is thinking and has always thought about that. But that is a skill that I have not seen, and we leverage that. Rick?
Rick, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. To kind of add to that, part of that is, how I came up, but I will say, like, I did learn a degree of that, or maybe amplify that, coming up with Jon as like a shop mentor position. I know Jon trained so many people coming up through our store, and it was always, I heard it maybe from a friend or the guy who was going through it, where you're not teaching a career, you're teaching a lifestyle, or it's more than just a career. I'm probably botching it, Jon, but thinking about, all right, here are the, get your ducks in a row inside and outside of work, so that way you're setting yourself up for that long-term success. When you're not burdened by, okay, I have to make this many hours this week to pay my bills, it relieves that pressure a little bit, and that mentoring or education that goes on within a shop, that maybe it's not how you tackle this car, but you tackle this part of your life. I think it applies just as much, because it's not just, we're not going to be one facet of success. You have to be multifaceted. You have to be dynamic in more than one way. And yeah, I mean, like I said, some of it came from mom and dad. Some of it came from guys I worked with at Polar, at other shops. Looks like Jon wants to tee in too, which I think will be good.
No, it's you hit the nail right on the head, Rick. Usually what I would say when I would get a new student is, I'm likely going to unteach everything you've learned. I'm going to teach you how to fix cars, but there's a lot of life skills that go along with it, because they go hand in hand. It's not just how do we fix cars. You're gonna be able to take what I teach you and put it into life, right? So that's the gist of what I would usually start day one with when I would get a new student. So
We say, Jay, I know myself, I love myself, and I love my job. And I think self-esteem for anybody in any profession, it isn't easy all the time, right? You start building it from day one on the planet. And what I think that I watch happen here is our job as leaders is to bring out the not less than, the more than, right? It's not about arrogance, it's about confidence. And that ability, as Rick said, to solve a problem in someone's life could be work related, but in a lot of cases, a means to an end becomes the primary focus. And in this industry, I'll see it. I've worked in a lot of other industries before joining the Walser Automotive Group, and the monetary consumption that this industry has is like none I've ever seen. I mean, I've never seen it like I've seen it in this industry. And I want for technicians their financial freedom to be there so that their brain can think. Because I'll tell you, when you're worried, like Rick said, about the next bill, this, your mind can't solve the problem as easily. The anxiety about being able to diagnose beyond, the stress, it's unlikely. And it can really impact people. And we watch how people go down a negative path sometimes when they're having a bad week, because they're afraid of something that isn't going to get accomplished, financially. And so I've watched Jon talk about, and I'll use a number just for round purposes, the road to 100,000, right? What does it look like? Because we have a lot of techs that want to say that, right? I'm calling it out. I'm calling it out. And so how do you get there? All right. And so is it all on production and Walser? And yeah, it is, but it's also on how is your financial hygiene? And I will say, this isn't a big brother conversation, but it is a conversation around the help that individuals can get. We do offer financial planning. We do have resources throughout the organization that can do this as part of what people do. And I think, Jon and both Rick and Rick have experienced that firsthand and are great role models for anybody who's listening.
I would 100% agree. One of the things, and Jon, I'll probably go to you, and then Lindsey, we're going to get to how we find these folks that actually fit our culture and everything that we are. But when you talk about financial education, one of the big concerns that I see with young technicians coming into the industry are maybe misuse of those funds to go buy tools, right? In a lot of ways, we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble early on a tool truck. And so as you are talking about this as a group, one, I just love the fact that you're talking about it, right? That you're bringing awareness to the fact that this can get you in a lot of trouble. I think in a lot of cases, it causes somebody to have to move jobs to get that sign-on bonus or get that little extra money because they find themselves in trouble and maybe going into a tool truck uncontrolled, right? And it can be really easy. I did that myself early in my career as a technician, to go on that tool truck and see all the shiny tools and see, I use the example that I had all the time of, I was 12 years old and bought an $80 set of Mac screwdrivers. For whatever reason, a 12-year-old needs a $80 set of Mac screwdrivers at 12 years old. It is the dumbest thing in the world looking back at it, because I could have easily gotten by with a Craftsman set or a Harbor Freight set. But yet here I was, trying to maybe puff my chest out a little bit and say, hey, I'm a tech, right? And it was so stupid when I look back at it. Jon, do you still see some of those issues with techs, or have we gotten a little maybe wiser on the ROI conversation of what those tools are going to produce for us?
Not enough. I'll say it that way. Unfortunately, what I see is you still see you go into all our stores, or the stores that, a lot of our stores we have built-ins. So that's a savings right there for toolboxes, right? But there's a lot of stores where they have the toolbox and then the cabinet and then the cabinet. It's a $20,000 investment probably for that toolbox. I've always tried to teach people like, be a maximist when it comes to your knowledge and a minimalist when it comes to the tools you need. It doesn't matter if you have that $250 tool if you don't know how to use it. So unfortunately, I would like to say that it has changed a lot. But the little bit it has changed, I think, is just changed with our overall, way of life. You go back to when I first started, and your options were the tool truck or drive over to Sears. Now you can, Amazon has this stuff, Harbor Freight has this stuff, all these, you have so many options where you can get it delivered to your door for the next day or 2 days, so I would encourage people to, if it's not something you're going to use all that often, try and find it cheaper or try and find a better way to do it. Maximize it with the knowledge that you can gain on how to problem solve that. And that's one thing I learned about myself too over the last probably 5 years is I love working on cars. But what I found out that I loved more was the problem solving of it. And it didn't always have to be the car. Sometimes it is with the people, working with technicians and trying to help them understand this, kind of like what Rick brought up, even just some financial stability in their household. When you relieve that pressure, it allows you to breathe a little easier.
And I think the fact that you're even having those conversations speaks volumes about the fact that you do actually care about the person and it's not just a number, right? That there are conversations happening that are trying to improve their lives. And, I think Sherry had mentioned it earlier, but not shying away from the fact that we go to work to take care of our families, and we need to make sure that we're putting these folks in the best position possible to provide for their families, right? And Sherry, I see you unmuted.
No, I mean, it's the last, the capstone on all of this conversation is, I think, for all of the three of us on the phone, I wish, Jay, there was a silver bullet to work. I wish there was a shortcut. I wish there was some, pill you could take or what. There isn't. Success is hard work. And that is it. I mean, I, I burn a lot of oil. There's no question. I know that about myself. And sometimes I say, is there ever a day when it's going to feel easy? And it doesn't feel easy, but it feels more rewarding than hard, if that makes sense. And so I think one of the things that I think for the space that Lindsey and the team is when they're looking for new technicians or trying to turn people onto this industry, and I'm always careful with how sobering I can be with this conversation, is that, 2025 for me is about work ethic, like return of the work ethic. And I do think work is a great thing, right? It gives you freedom. It gives you the opportunity to grow differently than maybe the generation before you and your family or whatever that may be. But it isn't easy. I mean, being a technician, being in HR, being a salesperson, whatever, work has an element of hard to it. And I think it's just pick wisely in that if you really love it, I mean, I would never do anything other than HR. And I have been asked throughout my career to go operations, go this. No, not turning over the people. This is my thing. So I love it. And two, who you work with. Like Rick said, if it is largely about the following and the connectivity that we have as a team can be very magnetizing because I have to learn and I have to count on them and they on me. And so that is a critical component to making work feel less hard because you have people that you're going to get through it with who are working equally as hard. And I know that this last 5 years, I think we've seen maybe our wits challenged a bit around work from home and calling out and who's not coming in and all that stuff. And it's been a tough, 3-5 years. It's been tough, but you got to be on the field where the game's getting played. And that there's a component to that I just think that as leaders and as employees, work is an important part of staying healthy and young and, grounded. I hope it's fun for everybody who does it. That's what I want. But in the end, I think talking about work ethic right now is really an important narrative that we need to have. And if you asked me, when I look at potentiality of the emerging leaders, or when we say, why them? I do care about work ethic, right? We know aptitude and perform all those things, but we care about work ethic as well.
Now,
Yeah, I'd like
Lindsey,
to.
Oh, sorry, Jon, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. Just to chime in a little bit on the work ethic thing, right? One of the things I asked when I was doing my one-on-ones with my team when I was the lead there was, and I still do. I've done this at one of our other stores as well. Is I'll go around. Usually it's to the younger crew, but I've done it to everybody as well. All age demographics, older than me and younger than me. I would ask just the simple question is, who do you come to work for? Who do you work for? And the reality of it is most of the times they would say Walser. And I would look at them straight in the face. I'd say, you're wrong. You work for yourself. You work for your family. You happen to work at Walser or whatever the location you're at, right? The difference is it puts the difference in what you say is the difference of who's the captain. If you say I work for Walser, then Walser's the captain. You're waiting for them to do something, or whoever you work for. When I say Jon Olstad is the captain, I am the captain of my own destiny. Then I am the one that when I want to get better at something, then I have to do something. You take some ownership in what you come there for every day and what you're trying to do in terms of your goals, the portion of the shop goals that's been set forth by hopefully somebody in the shop. But ultimately it comes down to is who's the driving force. And when you don't know what you're coming to work for, you're a boat in the ocean without a motor and an oar. You're just kind of bouncing off whatever comes your way. So my challenge to all our technicians is, finding out why they come in and who they work for. So that helps with that ethic.
I'm going to get that clip taken and just play it on repeat constantly. That was really, really good, Jon. And I think it's so important for technicians out there to understand that. That is great, great advice. Now, Lindsey, I want to go to you because when we talk about this and we talked about people strategy and heard it from the boots on the ground guys, right? The ones that are out doing a lot of it. I think so much of building a good culture is starting with the right person in the first place, right? And I think in our industry, especially right now, because there are so many shops that are desperate for talent, a lot of people will reach and they'll hire that person that's not a fit for our culture. They'll hire the person that might not have the greatest work ethic because they've got the technical ability on paper, right? How do you go into looking for people and doing it in a way that is going to bring value to Walser, that that they're going to be able to bring value to the culture, right? And I'm such a big fan of your style and how you go about everything, but that in particular, bringing the right people in and not just somebody that can fix a car, but somebody that is going to add to the collective culture of one of the stores that they're in. How much do you look at that when you're looking at a potential person to come in?
We look at it a great deal, if not more. Ironically, we were just talking about this with Rick and Jon. Sherry's been involved in a lot of these conversations, and we listed out 8 things that we felt were key qualities to success joining in any profession. But the majority of that is your willingness, not necessarily your aptitude. And Sherry mentioned that a little bit ago, but it's your willingness, your resilience, your ambition, and actually putting in the work to get there and knowing that, yes, I'm going to have to actually put in the effort. But if I have a good leader or a good team, and we really focus on that too, how will you fit in our team behaviorally? Not just you can bring all the talent and knowledge in the world, but it's how you apply it. So we have a few things going on behind the scenes in our organization, how we behaviorally select individuals, how we assess their natural driving behaviors and tendencies, and how that correlates to a specific job. So there is a technician one, there is a salesperson one, there is an advisor one, there's a manager one, and they're all very different. While technicians look for mastery and knowledge and the ability to execute, they do analyze things differently. They do naturally behave differently, but it also matches the behavior of the leader in the shop as well. So culture of shop to the person is as important. A match is key, but there's factors and behaviors that can be stretched at home or stretched at work that can morph into maybe the perfect mold that you want in the actual nature of the duties that you're performing too. So there's different ways that we're looking at it because we need to be modern, we need to be trendy, and we don't want to be desperate in hiring and be pitching ourselves against the next competitor and honestly sending the wrong message to our existing staff. We want to hire the right person, and I'd rather hire for potential and effort versus someone who believes they have it all and can earn 6 figures right out of school. That's not the reality. But we'll teach you if you're willing to learn, and then we'll get you to the place where you want to end up.
I think behavioral assessments are a big part of what, Lindsey is really perfecting right now. And, it's interesting. She and I we've really spent a lot of time thinking about the application of it. Does it work? And do we interview against them effectively? And even though we'll show a profile or attributes that we think are right, when you're working with a general manager or service manager who wants to fill the job and they're thinking through the practicality of it all, how do we perfect that? Because I think that once you start putting it out there, people who like this right now is as much about telling our story, which might not be for everyone. Right. It just might not. And I think you have to be very honest in your identity as it pertains to what type of employee you are and where you want to be. And that's an important component of it too, because I think we work with a partner on this topic who says something that, resumes and accomplishments are like theater, right? You tell that you're acting, you're telling the story, all that. In the end, like the selection of a job that you make for you, it should be personal. It should be about fit. It should be about the chemistry that you have in the organization, the ability to see yourself thriving there. And, I think that blend of assessing the behavior in a candidate and making sure that we're not wanting it more for them than they do,
Yes.
or trying to sell them on it, or there's a lot of that goes into it. And I think what we love about Rick and the other campus captains is that they're so authentic and genuine, that I'm more interested in the people who came up to them after, because they put it out there. And they are the other side to the magnet. The ones that want to be like that.
Mhm.
That's why we don't put on airs or do it in a programmatic, scripted way when we're on campus. We pick the actual person that we're trying to attract, so that they say, "Oh, I can relate to that guy or that gal," and and it finds us finding them more easily. And I think that that's a really important part about doing it. I'd also say, like, I've had a couple of individuals ask me, how do you get your techs to do it? Because that takes them away from the shop. And why would they want to do that and all that? And so I will put it out there too, that Lindsey, we pay stipends for these things, and we recognize and understand and respect the fact that you're not turning hours when you're doing this work. And so we have programs that recognize that. And by the way, I think Rick would do it anyway, right? Like he's always been an advocate for the education system, but to be consistent and to be fair, I mean, I reward those characteristics in him, which is why we pick the best to go on these campuses, and he should be paid to do that. And so that's why we do it.
Yeah, united purpose. Again, his purpose is my purpose. So Rick will go to a school that he was at Hugo City Hall for a city council career pathway thing that had nothing to do with his actual college, but it was in his region. So he went with someone on my team because he has a united purpose in representing Walser and learning what's going on in the career pathways with educational curriculum that also may not apply to the technician world whatsoever, but it applies to the business or potential students that might enter our world in accounting, in marketing, in HR. So yet again, I didn't even have to push. He goes, let me check my schedule. Let me see if that works for me. And he did it. And it did take time away from the shop, but it didn't matter because at the end, it's a long-term play, and it hopefully would yield a positive result for us all at some point.
Rick, what drives you to do that? Right. I know, Sherry talked about, I do think there are a lot of organizations out there that don't view that as a priority. I think that's a classic example of putting your money where your mouth is, right? Where somebody's actually doing it and they're being compensated for it. But what was it with you that drove you to want to do things like that?
I think it's probably like a desire to, like they said, attract, or at least let the people that are going through school, whether it's high school, college, whatever, know that we are here, we are present in the community, present in our shops, and if you guys want to come and try out the career, you want to expand what we have opportunities. We're not just some distant, okay, Walser might be headquartered in Bloomington, but that doesn't mean we care less about the people in Hugo or the people in White Bear Lake or the people in I think was it Hennepin Tech, all sorts of different schools around. We're not just here to make money and leave, or make money and not contribute. It's I guess it's just like, yeah, you lose some time. Last week I was out there for I think like 3 or 4 hours, but still did well. I mean, still was pretty productive last week. And if anything, it adds kind of a sense of challenge to it. Like, there's it's not really about that though. That's just kind of my personal thing. But if people are questioning, okay, what is Walser? Like what does the automotive industry look like? Like I can be a window into, what does it actually look like? I'm not you know, going to be able to give them everything, but I can answer questions that, I probably would have had going through high school, going into college. Like, is it something that is going to interest me? And, I guess being a technician and not, jumping in as like a manager or a, hands off position, like, hopefully build that sense of like trust with them, like with the schools, with the students that, all right, I'm not blowing smoke. We'll fill the jars. Like kind of going back to the other analogy, but I guess it's a lot bigger than turning hours.
J2, when you like, I'll say it selfishly, in the spirit of retaining your best talent, like we've worked together with these men for 7 years. Like a very bad day for me would be if one of them decided not to be here. So I look at them as being part of I care about this company. I care about the employees. I'm going to use every tool that I have to maintain a strategy around retaining them because they're good for other people. And so you get what you give. And so the fact, and I always say as well, you put your fastest horse in your biggest barn. So we put the very best people doing the very biggest tasks at hand, representing us. And that's where, I would shudder to think what it would be like on campus and Lindsey and I've talked about it. We never attempted to do it alone. I mean, and I see a lot of companies that do that. They send the recruiter or the HR team exclusively to the campus, and it only gets them so far. And no one can sell it like Rick can or talk about it firsthand. But I think about it like, I think one of the things that I think is really important when you're a leader, and if individuals who are listening think about how do you stay connected? Because you asked, how do you maintain these types of relationships? I always think every day, who am I wired to? At every minute, I'll say, haven't talked to Rick in about 3 weeks, due for a call. Or I haven't seen Jon this month, or I'm driving and I haven't seen the general manager of our BCJD shop and I got to call him. Can we be intentional in our communication with people that are performing? Because nothing feels better than having a human interaction for the purpose of building that relationship. And so for leaders who just go about their day and don't think about anything but either the customer, which is incredibly important, there's no question, but the wiring that we have to each other, I am actually pretty strategic about it. And I will go through my list and say, you know what? I haven't talked to Greg Davis, general manager Toyota, in 4 days. That's not like me, or whatever. I'll make sure that I have a sense of how close or far we are between people. And I think that's an important thing to know, because if you believe in, if Rick's a plant and I'm watering and I haven't, that's not good for the relationship. And by the way, he'll have something to tell me or something I need to think differently about or something I have to do or something that's wrong or I could work on. And I get that. And I know that so that I can keep, relevant. I think that's the word. So.
If like, I just wanted to add one last thing about it with, going out and doing outreach, whatever tasks are needed. If you can get the pop culture reference, it's from a early 2000s movie. It's those who have the ability to act have the responsibility to act. And that's just like, I know I can do these things and reach personal goals. Like it's not, detrimenting myself to go out and, be the face of Walser at the Hugo City Hall meeting. Yeah, sure, it cuts out a couple hours, but we can make it up. It's, I guess, like I said, it's, if you have the ability to do it, you have the responsibility to. It's, no, it hits home with me for that. So
Well said, Rick. The only thing I'll add to that is the first time Lindsey asked me to go to one, I'm like, well, absolutely, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, what am I going to bring to this? You know, and you end up getting there, and you just kind of hang out by the table, and when all the action starts, most of the time, because I'm in my uniform, right? It says my name, it says where I work. I look greasy because I came from work. Uh, you know, most of the time there's two, three, four people talking to you, and then you got to go grab one of Lindsey's team to, hey, can you help me explain the benefits? Because now they're asking about the benefits or whatever it is, but they want to know what it's like when I get to the shop. What is it like if I go there and my day one, what is it going to look like? Am I going in there and I'm unlocking my toolbox and it's like crickets, or is people there to help me? How am I going to grow myself? Is there somebody that's going to, lock arms with me and take me on this journey? And ultimately that's when in my experience, the ones that I've done, that's kind of the underlying questions that get asked, like, am I going to be left alone, or am I going to get help when I need it? So they ultimately, like they've already said many times, they want to hear from us, not necessarily the HR team or the recruiting team. They need to be there because there's plenty of information that they bring along, but the bait on the hook, so to speak, is the technician. They want to, we're doing what they want to do. What does it look like?
Lindsey, I have a feeling you had talked earlier about not trying to oversell the job, or not trying to get in. I think so many shops get into that scenario too, where if they do get in front of somebody good, they feel like they've got to almost go over the top to try and get that person to come join their team. Having somebody with a technical background join you at a career fair or wherever it might be has to help you to not have to oversell, right? Because here's an example of somebody that's done it and does it, and they're going to speak from their first hand experience.
It makes it very easy. The trust is built almost upon a first impression. So seeing Jon or seeing Rick, first impressions are everything, especially if it's at a career fair, because you by chance get to speak with someone that you hope that it's the right one. Now, if you're speaking to a classroom, that's where your money really, you get the best bang for your buck, and then making those true relationships with the instructors and the faculty members. But I'm not battling that stereotype as much. I can give my relevant experience to a certain extent, and I can have the best presentation, I can have the best content, I can speak to anything. But at the end of the day, they want to know, what is it really like when I get there? And who's my leader and who's my team? And if I have someone, even if it's not at the exact same shop, that represents a Walser technician in some way, it's like the curtains part, who's back there, it's all real. There's nothing to hide. And we've learned there's no reason to oversell anything, because we are who we are. Like, if you're going to sign up for this, like, this is what it is. We have learned along the way to just set real expectations and learn what they want to hear in result, like to what Jon was saying. They want to know underlyingly, what's it going to be like? And then how do you support me in all my other ways of being an employee in general? But what does my job look like? Who supports me? How do I get better? What's my career path? And then also the employee experience in general. But they make my life a lot easier. And then my goal is to make their life easier in return.
I love the point that Jon made earlier about having the right person there to answer the right question, right? So if I'm a technician and I'm going to a career fair and somebody does come up and ask me about benefits, that is not my wheelhouse. That's not what I'm going to be able to speak to. But having the comfort level that, hey, you know what? When I do go into that career fair, I'm going to talk to you about my experience and what I know. And then when you ask a question about something that isn't my wheelhouse, I have somebody to hand it off to, and it feels just so much more organized. And I have to imagine when you get that student or that technician to come up to you, uh, that's reflected when they talk to you, right? Because it is a little bit more clean and concise than just having somebody scramble and say, we'll get back to you with that.
And if you have good relationships with the schools, you can do easy follow-ups. There's less smoke and mirrors, as was said before. Like we just don't have that reputation, and it's taken a long time to build that. And luckily, Walser has been around a long time. We have great partnerships, but we keep it intentional in the classroom. We show up, we give good, honest feedback with curriculum. We give good, honest feedback to a technician's journey, whether it's automotive or auto body. And then we share our real experiences. If you share your time honestly and genuinely, you're not battling a lot of the initial stereotypes that exist. And I will say it has improved in my last year in the schools, specifically, and I think Rick could attest to this, that the faculty have taken a true stab at this to make sure that they're doing better for us, also for the employers. I've seen a shift, and I think Rick at Century College in St. Paul, or not St. Paul,
White Bear,
yes.
Yeah.
I think you would have noticed that in our presentation that there was you're going to pay attention to what these people have to say. They're a great partner to us, and we've got an industry expert in the building. Pay attention. And they listened, and they were silent, and they weren't on their phones. So I've seen a shift just in that alone from 3 years ago to this school year. So they are paying attention, but that's because we've been at their advisory meetings. We've given good feedback. We've sent our recaps. We won't be spending our time with you if it's not valuable. Because I have 30 schools I could be at with Rick, who's a master and needs to actually make time and money and produce. He's going to be here if I tell him to, because he knows I've done my homework.
I think with schools too, Jay, and Lindsey and I have talked a lot about this too. We're seeing everybody's returning, the distance learning and all those things have stopped, and everybody's back taking things seriously. And I think it's really important to continue to focus on being present with these schools and making sure. I also have the privilege of running the foundation for Walser, which is a platform for all our philanthropic giving. And, ultimately the number of opportunities that we have to be a grantee is tremendous, but not always will school grant makers actually fill it out or do it. And so, and I feel for them. I understand time is precious, and, they're busy, and I get all the challenges that exist for schools and for teachers. We want to make it easy for them. Inroads with those participants and those individuals who are, honestly, I think their greatest success would be these kids graduate with a job. That's you want to perpetuate that performance in life. And, so it's really, really important to maximize the experience on campus. And I think, we are, I think most people understand this, whether you're a dealership with a manufacturer shop like we are, or you're an independent, dealerships are in many cases family run, right? We know this. And the Walser Automotive Group Andrew and Paul have always been progressive enough to bring a lot of people in decision-making roles that are not family members. And I think there's something to be said for their confidence in their own vision, and the ability to take insights and learn from people that are coming into their space, like Lindsey or myself, or individuals that are helping them. Because, to say that you can hand select talent yourself just based on, who it is without an assessment or without a team, or, we bring them some of the, the keys to success from the outside. And, although I feel like a Walser sometimes, I'm not, right? But I have a commitment to the employees and to the people that extends far beyond, the family's understanding of what I do, but they empower us to do what we have to do to represent the brand. And I think that that's important when individuals are thinking about the shop that they go to. Where does the shop infrastructure or the company that you're joining get its insights, right? How progressive are shops? And I think that it's incumbent on us to continue to bring new opportunities and new programs to our employees. And if you weren't propelled to think differently about your work, or, you were limited maybe by who your family was hiring, you might not get that insight. You might not. And so the Walsers have been very good about expanding their reach on the leadership team to individuals who come from outside to bring, kind of insights from other industries.
This is so good. And I feel like when we first put this together, we looked at, almost a 2-hour podcast and saying, okay, what are we going to do to fill 2 hours? Well, this has not been very difficult to fill 2 hours. I think we could go on and on and on, but we're running up on about 5 minutes to go on the podcast. And I want to close things out and talk a little bit about how a program is working or isn't working. Because, and Sherry, I'm going to start with you here, because it is, when you're coming up with innovative ideas and you're doing things that are different than maybe a lot of other people are, how long do you give it to understand whether it's working or that it's something you want to pursue, or
Yep.
maybe you need to cut ties with? I know that's a really loaded question, but it is one
Yep.
of those where you guys try a lot of things and some of what works and what doesn't. How long do you let something go?
You're absolutely right. I just was cleaning out the HR closet this week. I was looking at things and saying what's working and what's not, right? And I will always start with the numbers. Andrew and I had this big discussion yesterday morning about intuition versus data. And believe it or not, right, you'd think your HR partner was intuitive. Based on all of the assessments that we do, I am actually one of the leaders with the single largest indicator of data consumption than a lot of people. I use data more so than most here. And the reason is because I cost the company money when I'm wrong, right? And so I know that. And so I use a lot of data to make decisions. So one of the things that Lindsey and I will do is we will look at utilization, right? We'll look at utilization and say, if a program is working, how do we know? And there's always a cost associated with a program, and we'll determine utilization. How many people are participating in it? Who does it touch? Who has access to it? I will also run is it accomplishing what we set out to have it accomplish, right? And so is it bringing people together and creating retention? Is it, and I'll get this question on the diversity front a lot. We have resource groups and we spend a lot of money on the resource groups. The people who participate in the resource groups, leadership panels, good retention, they stay. So there's a component associated with that we look at. I will also look at, is it still relevant for the problem at hand? And there are some challenges that I have right now, with some of the programs. And when tax treatment changes, I have to look at, am I compliant? That's the third thing that I look at. And then I also suggest, without leading anybody, what am I getting asked for that I can't deliver? And is it going to be more utilized than something I already have? And that's that's what we do. So we go in the closet, and I have a list that I'm working on with my team right now of good, not good, what could be better, and how are these things working, right? We get requests on healthcare and benefits and offerings, and then we have to do the research to make sure we're making a right decision. So I'm not afraid to abandon. I'll use, we have some medical programs that was a good idea at point A, and now I don't have nor need a lot of utilization in that, and I will retire it. I can suggest, I'll use care.com. We used to have a partnership with care.com, and when we thought there was a need and an interest in supportive daycare services historically, and there wasn't, so we stopped it back then. Now, recently, I'm getting people who want to know a little bit more about, and it was COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, right? And we found people put their kids with their parents in a lot of cases. Then COVID came and people said, no, can't risk getting my parents sick. So now I need other options versus there's not one nearby me that, so I'm always studying feasibility and what do people want? And we ask a lot of questions like that. And then when we retire them, I have to be very careful and mindful of giving the why. Why are we retiring it? What is happening? Why is it not being used or why is it being used? And then, figure out how I'm going to do that. And I have two very good things that I'm working on right now that we're asking ourselves those questions all the time. So Andrew's also, and everybody on the phone will nod loudly if there's such a thing. He's a real entrepreneur. He changes. He is like hugging air. I mean, there's a lot going on there in terms of ideas and things that he's trying to impact. And so I have to encourage that and be mindful of it. And also, provide him feedback on things that are working or not working so that he knows what to catch and release to stuff that may not be working. Right. So, that's, and I would say I get a good feeling at a 6 months to a year mark. I don't cut bait on something under a year usually, unless it's an abysmal failure, nobody likes it, whatever. If it was good enough to have gotten on the program, it's because we did a lot of research as to what it was doing. And I give it a year, usually before I say something is not sticking, and then I can tweak it too. So.
Well, that was a fantastic answer, and like everything, very well thought out. And I just want to say thank you to you guys as a group for taking a chance on doing this live podcast. And it was kind of a different idea than things that we've done in the past, but the conversation was so good. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we could have kept going on and on and on with this conversation. And I hope everybody that listened got value out of it and you learned something, because there was so much to be learned there. I think even when I go back and listen to it again, there will be a number of things that I'll be taking notes on and trying to learn from. So I just want to say thank you to the Walser Automotive Group. You guys are amazing people. I have so much respect for all of you. And it was an absolute pleasure to do this podcast here with you today.